The Illuminate Arts and Faith Conference in Chattanooga, Tennessee wants to help you find your tribe. Do you get way too excited about quoting Wendell Berry or C.S. Lewis in conversations with coworkers? Does your Spotify playlist include hymns, a little jazz, and a whole lot of Andrew Peterson? Join your tribe at Illuminate March 31 and April 1 for education and inspiration from speakers Russ Ramsey, Douglas McKelvey, John Hendricks, and others. Find a complete list of session topics and ticket information at southern.edu/illuminate.
In 2024, I set out to meet as many poets as I could and spend an hour with each one. I got more than I bargained for, more insight, more clarity, more hope. It's proved to be one of the richest highlights of my life. 17 writers, 17 deeply human conversations that made me sit up and pay attention. Franz Kafka once said, if the book we're reading doesn't wake us up with a blow to the head, what are we reading for? A book must be the axe for the frozen sea within us. And that's what I hope this new book will do. I hope it wakes us up, my friends. I hope these conversations will be the catalyst for something to be reawakened, re-enchanted, and reinvigorated. It's called An Axe for the Frozen Sea, Conversations with Poets About What Matters Most. I'm Ben Palpin, and I hope you'll come and listen in as I spend a little time with poets like Lucy Shaw, Malcolm Guite, Dana Gioia, and Lee Young Lee. Pull up a chair at the table as we dig into what it means to write well and to live well. An Axe for the Frozen Sea is now available from Rabbit Room Press. Visit the store at rabbitroom.com, or better yet, ask about it at your favorite bookseller.
Gardening is really mostly about tending your soil more than your plants. Just take care of your soil, and then good things will grow.
Welcome to the Habit Podcast, conversations with writers about writing. I'm Jonathan Rogers, your host. Christie Purifoy is a writer and a gardener committed to growing flowers and growing community and cultivating beauty. Her newest book is Garden Maker, Growing a Life of Beauty and Wonder with Flowers. She's also the host of the Black Barn Garden Club, an online community for aspiring gardeners. Christie Purifoy, I'm so glad to have you on the Habit Podcast today.
Thank you. I'm really glad to be here. I wish we've already launched into such a great talk. I almost wish we'd hit the recording button earlier. You're a lot of fun to talk to.
That's how it goes. You got to give people freedom to say whatever they need to say.
That's right.
So it is February. It's mid-February. Mm-hmm. And by the way, this episode is going to release just a few days from the day we're recording it.
Great.
And so you're a gardener. You're very much a gardener. I am a very novice gardener. But February, as it turns out, is a really fun time to be a gardener.
It is. There's a lot that starts happening this month. Yeah.
It has really changed my way of thinking about winter and the cycles of the year to
absolutely
have a garden. I mean, this is usually the time of year that I'm really, really down and just, February. So, I mean, my friend Greg Wilbur at New College Franklin, he's always advising students, don't make any big decisions in February.
In February, it's so true. Yeah, February is a hard month, and gardening changes that. I'm always telling people gardens begin in winter. Like that's when they begin. It has even changed how I feel about January, because January is when all the seed catalogs and plant catalogs come. So it's even helped with January. It just helps with the whole winter. March is a little hard, because now I'm really ready to go, but you still have to hold back, right? But it helps. It changes.
Yeah. Well, I love the way you talk about gardening in your new book, Garden Maker. And I guess where I want to start is you talk about gardening as being a garden is something that we tend rather than something we create. And I think that's such a helpful reminder with regard not just to gardening, but to all creative work.
Yeah.
The extent to which we are just tending what we've been given. I mean, it's a little daunting to think of, even though, that word creative, we think of, creation ex nihilo. You can do whatever you want to do. And the truth is, we can't do whatever we want to do, even as storytellers, for instance. there's a limit.
Right.
And I love the way gardening in its locality helps us to embrace our limits and expand our limits. And, you talk about gardening as a matter of vision and of desire. And yet that vision and desire is somewhat limited by the fact that the soil can do some things and can't do other things.
It's so true. And you're reminding me that for most of my life, until I was, well into adulthood, I didn't believe I could be a writer, because that meant I imagined that meant the kind of person who could just sit down and rattle off a great bedtime story to their child, just make it up out of thin air. So that sense of creating out of nothing, I thought that's what it was. I thought that's what creativity was. And I knew that's terrifying. I can't do that. My kids ask me for a story and I have to reach for a book. Like, I can't just pull it out of my head. So gardening, I think, is similar. Until I became more familiar with it, until I sort of tiptoed in, I think it felt the same. My first garden was a shared plot in a community garden in Chicago on the South Side. So like a vacant lot that was a community garden. And I remember being really afraid of that too. It just seemed like, what in the world am I going to do with this mound of dirt? Like, it could be anything.
Yeah.
But the really freeing thing is to discover the limits you're working with. And so for me as a writer, it was about realizing, oh, I'm an observer, I'm a noticer. Just write down what I'm seeing. Just write down what I'm seeing, and then connect the dots and tell a story that way. So that was so freeing. And the gardening has been really a similar journey. It comes back to like paying attention, seeing, listening, because you can't just do whatever you want. And it turns out that's good news. That's helpful. We create better art, I think, when we accept that and we work within that.
Yeah. Tell me about what you've learned, like in your patch of ground there in Pennsylvania.
Southeastern Pennsylvania. Yeah.
Like, what are some things you thought you could do that turns out you couldn't, or things you didn't know you could do that turns out you could?
Yeah. I as someone who, like, a beauty lover, like I love beauty. That's just kind of, my thing in life. And it can lead to almost a kind of greediness for beauty. So being rooted in a place that is just what it is, I will often, less so now, but more when I started, bump up against things I wanted, like, oh, wouldn't it be great to have a beautiful little creek burbling through here? Or wouldn't it be great to plant some of the thirstier trees like a sycamore or willow? Well, I live more on a little hilltop, a kind of rise. And so we get plenty of rainfall here, but my spot is going to be a little drier, drain a little more quickly than if I had that kind of creek bottom, land, right? Yeah. So to just be able to honestly say, like, okay, that's beautiful, but that isn't what I've been given to tend. This is what I've been given to tend. What kind of beauty wants to grow here? And I still sometimes dream about the willow tree and the sycamore tree and, the milkweed for the monarchs, but I don't really have a good spot for that. I still am sort of distracted, might be the word sometimes, for those things. But learning to, like, appreciate those where they live, to go visit the sycamore tree down the street, to admire my neighbor's willow tree, and then to say, but what is needed here? What wants to grow here? And then to steward that. So I think that's what I mean with the tending. But there is still so much creation that happens. Like, there still is so much possibility. And that's really fun. But it's amazing to plan a garden, plant it, set things out, and then be surprised by what results. And I always think, why am I surprised? I planted those seeds. And yet it is still such a delight and such a surprise. And it feels like a gift I did nothing to deserve. And yet I was participating. But and then it's almost like there's like some worship involved. Like, I feel so humbled by the gift of this garden, even though I was involved. But I don't know. It's just a crazy thing when spring comes and I just think, where did all this beauty come from? I am not worthy.
I also love the things that I forgot we had planted 2 or 3 years ago that didn't do well. And now for whatever reason this year, it's going nuts.
Yeah. Sometimes things need a couple of years to settle in and get their feet. And it's wonderful when you think they've failed and they're gone and then they surprise you. Oh, it's the best thing.
Yeah. Yeah. No, but this all feels like grace.
Yeah. Oh, it is.
And it is a way to participate.
A way to participate. Exactly. A way to join the chorus, a way to be involved. It's so great that like our Creator God like instilled that in us and invites us into it. You know, that gardens don't just happen. I'm going to share, like, there's a little thing. It used to be more of a pet peeve for me. It's less of a pet peeve now. I so get it, but I think it's a missed opportunity. When I first started gardening and I would share photos online or, share kind of beauty from the garden, people would often respond with something like, "Oh, isn't our Creator amazing? Doesn't he make beautiful things?" And this is true. Absolutely.
Yeah, right.
I too give honor to God, glory to God. But a part of me wanted to say, well, I chose that rose bush and I put the compost around it and I pruned it. And so I'm in this story too, right?
Yeah, right.
And I don't think that's a prideful thing. I think it's like part of the joy is like, hey, yes, our God is an amazing creator. And he says it's going to be even better if you get involved too. It's going to be even better if we do this together. And I that makes me think of Jesus calling us his friend. Like, hey, you're my friend. Let's garden together.
Yeah. And the elements of the Lord's Supper are not water and wheat. It's human culture, bread and wine.
Exactly. That's so important. Isn't that incredible that he like nourishes us and feeds us with like the work of our own hands? It's so beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. So we've talked about the limitations that you enter into in gardening, and you also talked about the participation in the act of grace that is gardening. I'm also interested in the idea that, I think I've already said this. You speak of gardening as a matter of vision and a matter of desire.
Yeah.
And us steering the created order toward our desire and our vision. You have any more to say about that?
Yeah, it's a beautiful, complicated thing because we get things wrong. We're just human. We want to achieve something. We have a goal, and but there's so much we don't know. So I'm very aware, like that humility in the garden of knowing, like, I have a vision for this place. I feel like I've seen some beautiful pictures in my head, and I'm going to try this, but it might be exactly the wrong thing. So there's this kind of give and take between like this optimistic, dreaming, visionary, and knowing like it's that has to be worked out, in the soil, in the creative process, and that there will be frustrations and disappointments along the way. And I'll say as well, if anyone listening, like if you too are that kind of visionary, like you see a great novel, you can just imagine a song. You can't quite hear all the notes, but you're like, if I just work, I can get that song down. It's such a great experience, but it's also, I have felt like it can be a burden to live with. I've had to learn to live in a place where I'm constantly seeing things that could be made more beautiful, more lush. I could put a garden here. I could plant a tree there. Like I'm always seeing these things, and I'm kind of it's an exercise too. Like I'm exercising that imagination and that vision. And then I have to keep living my life in the place that doesn't yet have that tree and hasn't quite realized that perfect garden. And that hurts sometimes. It's like it's a kind of painful tug of war. And I feel like a lot of artists, especially writers I know, they're that novel in their head, or that, that poem that they just haven't quite got down on paper. Like it lives in their head, and it's doing great work to draw them on. But you've got to kind of live with this almost like holy dissatisfaction day to day, right? And to find peace and contentment and stillness. Even so, there is this not quite completed thing,
Yeah. As I was reading your book, I was thinking about, in my own yard, it's so shady and so lovely. These big, mature, something like 100 and something trees in my yard, big trees.
Wow.
And which also means it's really hard to grow tomatoes.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think, boy, it sure would be nice to cut down some of these trees and grow tomatoes. And I guess we can get it in our head. I've got this vision. I can get so focused on this vision that I can trade in what's the truth is to trade an ash tree for a tomato vine may not,
right,
in the big picture, may not be a good thing to do.
It's so true. Yeah.
And it's tempting just to impose my will on, I actually own a chainsaw and I could cut down some of these trees and plant tomatoes. And then I think I would immediately, maybe not immediately, I would be sorry.
Yeah.
Because I was so intent on, I got to make this happen the way I see this.
Yeah. Oh, it's
whereas
so
there's
true.
some really beautiful things that are already happening.
Yeah.
And if I can align myself with what's already happening here and get my tomato somewhere else.
Yeah. And I think, that happens in, we could talk about the big ways that happens. That's a big thing, a big experience. And I have found in writing, it's also in a smaller experience. I had the experience just recently where, I was invited to submit an idea for an essay for a book. And I knew that what was wanted was something fun and whimsical. And I made a proposal. I thought, this sounds good. This sounds good. And as I started kind of jotting down the first notes, I realized, the details in this story are going to take this in a harder, darker place. And I had to sit there for a minute and think, do I force this to be the fun, whimsical thing I thought it was going to be? Or do I write this essay that is starting to kind of show itself to me? I'm still not exactly sure how that's going to work out in terms of this book.
Yeah.
But I feel myself sort of saying, okay, maybe this is the thing that needs to be written. And I'm both excited about it because there's clearly a story there, but I'm also a little bummed. I kind of thought I had an idea for something fun, and this is going to be more serious. Maybe, I don't know, maybe it'll end up being a weaving of the two, but realizing the material is telling me something and I kind of have a choice now. Do I go in that direction, or do I, like you said, impose my will, do the thing as I first imagined it? I'm pretty sure if I listen, if I submit almost to the details, it's probably going to be a better essay. But it's not going to be the one I said I wanted to write when I started. And this is so true of gardens as well, of places and of our caring for places.
That's great. I love it. Okay, I want to talk about another idea from your book that really captured my imagination. And you pointed out that weeding, not my favorite part of gardening, but one of the great things about weeding is it gets you down close to the ground where you can see what's actually going on and you see beauties you didn't know. I thought I was down here to get some crabgrass up, and then I notice how this particular root system is working, or I notice, or maybe I notice another problem that's more serious than the crabgrass, or maybe I just understand a little bit more what's going on here. And I love that insight.
Yeah. It took me years to get there. I don't love weeding either. I mean, sometimes a good weeding session can be kind of a meditative activity. You just get into it sometimes. But when it's 90 degrees and humid and things are taking out, it can be a real misery, but you got to do it. You keep getting back out there. And over the years, I started to realize that when I would think of my garden, or I would think of, that kind of vision where, okay, what am I doing next? What do I want to add? My memories of the garden were often those views I had when I was down on my knees, literally. I now have a little kneeling pad. I find that helps.
Yeah, right.
But when I was down on my knees, the things I was seeing or noticing, so now my let's call it my winter memory of the garden, right? My thinking over, the last growing season, I wasn't just seeing images of me above my garden, or me sort of sitting in my garden, or me, just walking by my garden. But I'm seeing these pictures that I know are like, oh, that's what it's like when you're down on your knees in your garden and you're appreciating things. So, there's plants that are special to me because I spend a lot of time with them, because they're like the low lying, ground cover things that I see a lot as I'm, as I'm weeding. And it's funny that we have that metaphor, like in amongst the weeds, and you can't, it's almost like that's a place where you can't see, you don't know what's out there. Yeah. But weirdly, it doesn't work that way in the garden. It's actually a place where, like, now you've zoomed in, now you're focused, you're so focused because you are. And I'll just say as well, for most of us in like our landscape type garden, you just got to get down and hand pull it. Like there is not, like, you just got to do it. And so that means you are like with your fingers and your eyeballs, like you are like zoomed in to notice the wonders. Yes. Also to see the problems before they become overwhelming. Uh-huh. And I think to be made small in that way in your own garden, it is kind of a cool thing as well. So I'll admit, it doesn't make me like, yay, I get to go out and weed again, right? It's still an effort. It's still work. Yeah. But I've seen the benefits. There are so many things I wouldn't have noticed or caught in my garden if I hadn't been down on my knees. Yeah.
Well, as I was thinking about what you were saying about weeding, I also was thinking about self-editing, like going through a piece of writing, and you think you're going in there to fix a comma splice, right? And you get in the sentence, and you start to fix, you think, oh, now I see what this sentence needs, right? I thought I needed to find a better word to stick in or to replace the word, and what it really needs is, once you fix it, you realize, oh, that's still flat, right? And then you do something else, like, okay, now, and that's what I love about editing. Oh, that's such a good analogy. It's so true. Or you think, oh, that's a minor fix, and you go in and you make it, and you realize, oh no, like the concept isn't even work. Like I've got to do some more thinking here. Mm-hmm. But if you hadn't gone in, you hadn't slowed down enough to go in and fiddle with the comma, you wouldn't. That'd be like that missed opportunity. Yeah. So I guess one way that works out is so often the solution to a sentence level problem is to break the sentence into two. Uh-huh. And then when you break it into two, you got two sentences that don't quite do what they're supposed to do. Right. And then you fix both sentences, and now suddenly something new is flowered to continue. That's good. Yes. And so I just think that's so, the more I think about gardening and writing, it's such a great, gardening is such a great activity for people who do other kinds of creative work. I think so. And, like on that note, I think especially the thing I especially appreciate about it is that it's such physical embodied creativity. Uh-huh. And I'm not a singer, I'm not a musician, I'm not a dancer. So I haven't had a lot of experience in my life of this. I'm not a painter. Like I like using my physical self beyond just typing. I'm thankfully a pretty fast typist, but but my creativity has often just been a thing that lives in my head. Mm-hmm. And I like that. I'm a thinker. I like spending time in my head, but to have a way to be creative that just pulls me right out of and gardening has its head moments too. I spend winter planning, dreaming, right? It has that too. But at least in the growing season, you stop thinking often and you just start working just with your physical self. And so I have found actually it's a really good, like if I'm working on projects in the summer, it is so nice to be able to sit down at my computer, write for a while, and then go out in the garden and not think and just like sort of create in a whole other way. They just fit really well together. I feel really grateful that these are the things that have been given to me to do, and they feel like a really good match. Yeah. I think one experience I've had with gardening is just having a new relationship with failure. Oh gosh, yeah. Oh yeah. And I love the way you talk about dahlias, and that your first exposure to dahlias was a Martha Stewart magazine. Yeah, Martha Stewart is friends with Snoop Dogg. Apparently, did you know this? I did know this. I have been reading Martha Stewart magazine for many years. Does Snoop make an appearance in Martha Stewart magazine?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
He also went to high school with Cameron Diaz.
Oh, I
Snoop
didn't know that. Oh,
yeah.
What an interesting senior class that must be.
Yeah, I don't think they were the same class, but,
Okay.
yeah, same. Anyway,
Funny. Yeah.
I have one more Snoop anecdote, but I'm going to resist. I'm not going to tell it. And then I will have exhausted my knowledge about Snoop. But anyway, Martha Stewart, Dahlias.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
Dahlias. How do you say it?
I say dahlias.
Yeah.
It's like many a writer, I read words more than I hear them spoken.
Yeah, right.
So who knows? But I say dahlias. And I have such a vivid memory of reading. So when I lived in Chicago and I just had this little summer plot where I grew a few tomatoes with friends, I was at that time a subscriber to Martha Stewart Living magazine. This was before you could get your fix on Pinterest or things like that. So I looked forward to this every month, except the month of March was always dedicated, the whole issue, to gardening. And every time that came, I was disappointed because I lived in this city apartment. I just did this little plot in the summer. I didn't think of myself as a gardener. And the whole magazine now was going to be about gardening. And so I'd be a little bit bummed every time, but I would still read it. And I read this article about growing dahlias. And I vividly remember like reading the article with sort of a growing horror and fascination that people would work so hard to get these perfect dahlia flower heads. And I remember turning the last page and thinking, and I think there must have been at that time something of knowing like, well, someday I won't necessarily live in a city apartment. Maybe I'll have a garden of my own. And I felt relief knowing, well, I know at least I will never worry about growing dahlias. That's clearly not for me. Ow, how wrong I was. So wrong. And we moved to this farmhouse in Pennsylvania, started growing vegetables. Slowly, flowers started creeping in as I realized, oh my gosh, the thing I'm really hungry for, it's not so much the tomatoes, although I do still love the tomatoes. It's definitely not the zucchini. It's beauty. I'm just hungry for beauty. I just want to fill my life with beauty, and I can grow flowers. And so I started growing more and more flowers. And that's when the dahlias came back in. And the thing that changed everything for me is reading another homeowner gardener write about growing dahlias herself. And she said, okay, everybody tells you have to dig them up every year. You have to store the tubers. You have to do this. You have to do that. Well, just if you don't want to, don't do it. And then maybe they'll come back. Maybe they won't. But, you could always plant new ones. And it was like she just freed me up to try. Yeah. She freed me up to play. And I tried and I played and I was hooked. And now I have it's like all dahlias around here.
Yeah. No, but I love that insight. Just try it. See what happens.
Just try it.
You don't want to, you don't want to do the Martha Stewart perfectionist way, the perfectionist way that kept you from doing it at all.
Right. Don't do it. Yeah. Just try.
As you said, as I said earlier, it changes your relationship to failure.
It totally does. Now it's like, it's not something to be like avoided at all costs. It's not a mark of shame. There have been years where, so I do most years dig up my dahlias, and some years I just haven't gotten to it. Life's gotten in the way, and some of them came back, most of them didn't. And I ordered new tubers. Like it wasn't the end of the world. I tell people there are no garden police. There are no dahlia police. Just try.
Well, it's so funny because as I started your chapter on dahlias, actually, it may have been earlier in the book you mentioned about digging up that you're supposed. I'm using air quotations now. Right. That you're supposed to dig up the tubers, and I thought, oh, we planted dahlias last year and we didn't plant the tubers. I guess I did that wrong, and then I got to the next chapter, the later chapter that said, good. Don't dig them up if you don't want to. And and here's the story. I don't want to dig up the dahlia tubers.
Yeah. You don't have to. Yep. I love it.
And they may come back in 2 years instead of next year, right?
They might, yeah. And I think actually you have a good chance that they'll come back and surprise you. Gardens are full of surprises.
Oh, good
surprise. Some bad surprises, but a lot of good surprises.
Yeah. That's right. I mean, I think the first couple of years, it felt like there were more bad surprises than good surprises.
Yeah.
And then as the years go on, there's more good surprises than bad surprises.
Yeah.
And there are also some years where I'm sure there are years in my future of lots of heartache with bad weather or whatever. But that has been. It's also been so fun to see that the possibility of incremental improvement.
Right.
This yellow clay that seems like it's never going to get better. It finally gets better.
It does slowly. Yeah. Gardening is really mostly about tending your soil more than your plants. Just take care of your soil and then good things will grow. Yeah.
Is there a writing insight or a creative work insight out of that? Because this, of course, is I have to bring this back around to writing or we'll be in trouble.
Or why are we here? Yeah. Actually, I think there is, because I feel like I get into trouble with writing when I jump ahead and I focus too much on the big concept, the big idea. I'm going to do this big thing. I'm going to write this great book. I'm going to, and that's fun. That's important to dream in that way. But then if I'm not willing to just sort of stop and sit down and write the little words and do the daily practice and, and that I think is for me tending the soil. Daily I'm reading good things. I'm reading poetry. Like reading poetry is one way for me that I feel like I need to tend to the soil by regularly reading poetry. I need that discipline. I need to be sitting down most days and writing out a few words. Like that is tending the soil. It might not feel like that little thing I'm writing today is leading me toward the big glamorous book I want to do or whatever it is, but it is. So that focus not on the end result plant flower thing, but just that the sort of more brown, boring, dirty thing, I guess.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I was talking to a boy, a young man yesterday who just graduated from college, and he was interested in writing. He's like, but I feel like I'm behind because I didn't major in creative writing, and I was so interested in kind of nature and fishing and things like that. And I feel like I'm kind of behind. I'm like, man, that's where you gotta have something to write about. Right. And that feels like tending the soil too, sort of filling your cup, not with, writing advice or whatever, but with, I think the class that I took in college that had the biggest influence on my writing was a geology class.
Oh, that makes sense.
When I realized the world is telling stories all the time.
Yes.
And you walk by a road cut and you see what happened here. You look at that physical evidence and you understand that it's static, but you understand some motion that happened to create that static snapshot. And that has, it wasn't freshman English that taught me how to tell stories. It was things like that. I think that's relevant to our observation about.
I think it is, because I'm even just now realizing that, like, gardening and writing, especially the writing of books, have gone absolutely hand in hand. I knew before moving here, I wanted to shift from an academic career to a more creative writing work, but I didn't know what I was going to write about. I didn't really know what is my thing? What am I going to do with words? And I moved here and started tending this place and growing gardens and found that I had so much to say and that this is really what I wanted to write about. And so I don't know if I could have had the one without the other. It was that lived experience that was now giving me, it was like they're just working together hand in hand. And another reason I just feel so grateful.
Yeah. Okay. One couple more. We're about to run out of time, but I've got a couple of things I want to talk to you about. One is the idea of division, of dividing, that you, well, I'll let you talk about it. Instead of me trying to explain division, you talk about division and why you found it interesting.
It is such an important garden practice. And it scared me for a long time because it seemed like work. And this is a theme in my life. I just want to take it easy, but work scares me. But it turns out like gardens, especially perennial plants, are so generous that they need to be dug up and literally divided, like with a garden knife or a sharp spade. Sometimes you can be tender, but usually you don't need to be. You just need to chop that big old root ball in 3 parts or, or more. And then you replant those parts, and very quickly in the spring, they are just putting down roots, and now you have 3 or 4 plants that are growing even more vigorously than that one was before. So this is so generative and so exciting, really, like free plants. But it does take that willingness to just take the time to dig in and get a little sweaty and wrestle that root ball out of the ground and do the work.
Yeah. And trust the process, because it doesn't
it looks like you're just killing the thing. And, you usually, if there's already green growth, you might want to kind of cut that back so that the new plants are focused on the roots and not trying to sustain this top growth. And so it really looks bad at first. And, each plant has its own, little methods for division, but more or less that's what it is. And what a glorious thing to know that you're just, by participating, like this thing is just, I don't know, I think of Jesus like breaking the bread and the fish, and how it's just in that sacrificial breaking and the blessing over it. Like now it's feeding and feeding and feeding so many. I just think like this is a metaphor, but this is a real thing in our world.
Yeah.
Like, this is how the world works.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid of it. Like this is where, good things come. And Jesus showed us the way. And here it's literally true in my garden.
Yeah. Yeah. And in creative work, it's as you sort of put the ideas out there, you don't have fewer ideas. It multiplies, and so
it does.
It's so tempting to steward your. Okay, I've got this idea. I'm thinking about sticking to this essay, but maybe I should save it for another essay.
Yeah.
But there's always more wherever that idea came from. There's always more where that came from, and I thought about that as you divide these plants.
Yeah.
And it feels sacrificial for you're tearing this thing apart, and there's just more, and that abundance.
Yeah, and they're like healthier for it. Like the original plant will start to decline if you don't do this. Like it's like begging you, dig me up, share me, spread me around. Yeah, and if you don't do it, it's going to suffer. It's not going to be quite as good. So there is something about that stinginess in our creativity that isn't serving anyone, least of all us. Yeah.
I was talking to someone the other day who his brother had a willow tree, and so he took a branch of the willow and planted his willow tree in his yard, and that grew. Yeah. And then the first brother's original willow tree died, and so he took a piece off of that willow tree and planted that again. And so now that's
gorgeous.
Yeah. It's the same willow tree just kind of going around back and forth between his brothers.
Wow. So. Wow. That's gorgeous.
Okay. I want to hear about your Black Barn Garden Club.
That's right. Yes. I have this online gardening community, and it really is. I always say it's for aspiring gardeners or experienced gardeners. Yeah. All levels welcome. But I have found as I was trying to get into gardening and learn about gardening, you would think we have all the information at our fingertips on the internet, but it is like trying to learn while a fire hose is blasting in your face. It just feels impossible. And so, I've really loved cultivating this community the past year or so, because we need community for all kinds of reasons. We know that, but gardeners really need it to help one another sort of sift through all like the too much information, contradictory information, and just have the confidence of another gardener saying, you know what, I tried this. Why don't you try this? Or have you thought about this? And to be in it together. It's also become a place where I get to drop into teacher mode, and I share weekly videos, like kind of teaching from my garden or giving tips, or I get to write up about my favorite plants or things I've learned. And so I'm just realizing, actually, as I'm saying this, it has been a way of me kind of dividing the knowledge I have gained over the years and sort of sharing it in that way. I hadn't even thought of that to now. I think that's why I've been loving it so much. Yeah,
well, it's such a great idea for a membership site. I think it's.
I'm glad.
I love that you're doing it. I run a membership site too, and it's such a neat way to help people gather around a shared interest and a shared love. And so I'm glad you're doing that. And you don't. it's not always open to new members, but it is right now, right?
It is right now. Yeah. blackbarngardenclub.com. And
I'll put a link in the
that'd be great. Yeah. We're open right now, especially with the Garden Maker book just coming out. I feel like more people, my hope is that they'll read the book and think, I want this. I can do this. Yeah. But then if you need a little more support, come on into the Garden Club.
Sounds great. Okay. I typically am with the question, who are the writers that make you want to write? But I want to do a special edition. Talk to us about catalogs, books, and I have mixed feelings. I have a sort of a complicated relationship with seed catalogs because I love them. I love looking at them, and then. I'm always telling writers, don't compare your draft to the finished edited book of, and that's what I feel like I'm doing. Everything looks so easy when you look at the seed catalog, and then they don't mention that you can't do this in a shady yard in Tennessee,
Yeah. Oh, I have a great recommendation actually for writers, really, because one of my favorite catalogs, you may know it, is Seed Savers Organization.
I love that catalog.
Yeah. And I think it's because they're selling all these heirlooms and they're telling the stories of this tomato or this squash. And they're inviting people to like swap seeds and share seeds. So now it's a community.
Yeah. And it's such a generous feeling.
It is. Yeah. So I really love that one. And then I think, in terms of gardener writer models, I really love Monty Don. So he is known as like the British gardening guru, and he has his show Gardener's World, which even here in the US we can watch streaming somewhere. So I love his show, and he has great books. Yes, yep, I've got my BritBox subscription just for Gardener's World. But he has a lot of books. So by
the way, did you know that Monty Don used to be like a jeweler to the stars?
Yes. So I read he has a memoir about that whole period of his life, and talk about failure. Like they were so successful, and then they had massive failure, and that's what led him to become a gardener. Yeah,
like he sold jewel-encrusted jewels to Elton John and things like that. Yeah.
It's so and now he has a jewel garden. I love it. So I love Monty Don. Can't recommend him enough.
I do too. And his dogs.
Oh, his dogs. I know. And was it Nellie? No, it was
Nigel who recently died. Yeah.
Yeah, we all loved Nigel. Yeah, this dog we've never
Spoiler
met.
Alert.
But
Spoiler alert, Nigel dies.
So good. There's good reading in the gardening world, I tell you.
Yeah. So Seed Savers catalog and Monty Don and Gardener's World. And all right. Well, thanks so much. This has been so much fun, Christie.
It has. I love talking with you. Thanks for a great conversation.
Let's do it again soon.
I hope so.
The Habit Podcast is brought to you by The Rabbit Room, where art nourishes community and community nourishes art. To check out more of our podcasts, visit rabbitroom.com/podcast. Our work at The Rabbit Room would be impossible without the generous support of our membership. If you'd like to learn more about membership at The Rabbit Room, visit rabbitroom.com/member. And thanks for listening.
The Habit Membership is a library of resources for writers by me, Jonathan Rogers. More importantly, The Habit is a hub of community where like-minded writers gather to discuss their work and give each other a little more courage. Find out more at thehabit.co.
If you've enjoyed this podcast episode, consider joining the Rabbit Room membership. Your membership helps sustain this community, funding everything from publishing and podcasts and theater productions to events and programs that support artists who create with a Christ-centered vision. We'd love to have you on board. Learn more at rabbitroom.com/member.